Hello and welcome to episode 30 of the Carry On with Carrie podcast. Today, I am so grateful to welcome Andrea Engel to the podcast. Hi.
Hello. Thanks
Welcome.
for having me.
Thank you for coming.
This is a really nice invite. So yeah, thank you for thinking that I could bring something to your platform.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Andrea, you're a realtor with MaxWell Devonshire Realty. Part again.
Yeah.
You were a longtime co-anchor of the Global Edmonton's Morning News. You have been recognized with the Distinguished Alumni Award for Journalism from MacEwan University. And to this day, you remain passionate about equipping people with the integral information.
Yes. Providing people with all the right info they need to make their best decisions.
Yeah. That's amazing. So what we're here, though, to talk about today is your experiences with parenting a child with autism spectrum.
Yes. Right. So we have a 21-year-old son, and Matthew was diagnosed at a fairly early age. So yeah, my husband and I are just, pushing forward and now into adulthood with raising Matthew.
Looking into back from the beginning,
Right.
The childhood and the diagnosis and all the stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Where you're at right now as far as how the journey and
Yeah. This is, it's so nice to be able to do this, Carrie, because it's kind of a chance to sit, pause, and reflect, and to go, wow, we have come so far. This is perhaps further than I thought our kid might have been capable of getting when we started on this journey, and had a diagnosis for him. So yeah, where we find ourselves today with our young man, because he is a young adult, he has graduated from high school, of course, not with a general diploma, peers, not like typical students would get from finishing high school, but, certainly he was recognized with a certificate, attended all his years, through the school. And so now we were fortunate enough to be able to stream Matthew into Norquest College. And so that is like a trade and technical college that he was able to attend kind of during COVID. And it's a transition to employment program.
Okay.
So it is pretty valuable for people who, have some cognitive impairment and people who still are trainable, educable, and they can, garner some skills with some really good personalized, individualized training. So that looks like a 9-month program that he went through. So then they equip them with lots of skills in that regard, and they can go on to, establish employment somewhere. And for Matthew, yes, he has been able to get some part-time employment along the way. And we've also got him in some volunteer roles, which is really beneficial.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the way volunteering affects people and the positivity, it breeds positivity.
That's true.
Yeah.
Very good point. Yeah. So he's being involved with the Strathcona County Food Bank. He was there for a couple of years.
Okay.
And he also is very lucky to be able to volunteer at a seniors residence. And so with some of the seniors in our community, and they love having him. So
I bet
it's been a good fit, really great community for him. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So can you go back a little bit then, if you're comfortable with sharing, how was it and how did you kind of discover that maybe something was a little bit different?
Something was amiss. Yeah. So yeah, there's lots in between. There's 21 years to take you back on and to catch up on here. So
yeah.
So yes, I'll have to cast my mind back and reminisce. And it kind of, it's so funny when you're living it in that moment. You feel like, I will never forget this process. I will never forget this stage. I'll never forget this form that I'm filling out. There's forms and there's so many processes, and there's all of those hoops and all of that legwork to be done, all that investigation to go with, and the research that you have to do. I thought I'd never, these lines would never be blurred. I'd never forget all of these, definitions and such. But it's funny, time has a way of softening that and of rounding those edges and so on. So how we knew that something was perhaps not typical with our son's development, probably, we had some sort of clues, I would say, early on, even in infancy. We were lucky enough to be parents to a neurotypical son, our first child, so not on the spectrum. So we knew what we should have been looking for, what to be looking for when it comes to developmental milestones and markers and all that sort of thing. But when Matthew was developing, some things were just off. Slower to do certain things, slow or avoidance on things like eye contact. Didn't want to make eye contact. We kind of say he benefited from sort of a passive neglect, meaning this was a baby that went against the grain of what most infants desire, which is they take a lot of security and comfort from comforting them. Whereas our son was just the opposite. He did not want to be rocked and held and, nursed and cooed to and all of that sort of thing. That really any normal baby or normally developing baby, I should say, would be benefiting from.
Right.
So if we were holding him or bathing him or, he would have these fits and he would scream. And so that was kind of the indicator that something could be off here.
Yeah. Because it is a sensory.
Yep. And so, there's some sensory processing disorder that goes along with that. So, what a person on the spectrum is taking in, they're not processing it the same way. So it can be overstimulating. It can be overwhelming. And I've also heard, that for what you and I are doing right now, which is we're meeting, we're in person, and we're sitting here in a quiet room and we're having a conversation. We're making eye contact. We're talking and we're one-on-one. For this, a person who has ASD, who is on the spectrum, this would take an inordinate amount of concentration. This would take energies, Carrie, that you and I just take for granted, and we don't have to input into this dialogue that you and I are having right now.
Right.
So, for people in the spectrum community, it's just so hard for them to keep it together. They are using energies and concentration that we just don't even understand would have to go into such an everyday regular task or behavior like we're doing right now just to have a conversation.
Right.
So,
and a child not knowing what was happening and you not understanding
what they're not understanding.
Imagine that.
Yes, that becomes really difficult. Yeah, it's almost like, you have to figure out what language they're speaking because they're doing some of these things, once you start observing and watching them, they're doing these things that this seems really peculiar. But as I say, we were very lucky because we had, a neurotypical child by which to gauge this from. So in the autism community, what I've heard from other parents is it's so hard if you have your first child who has autism because you don't know what the regular occurrence of milestones and markers and development should look like.
Right.
When should they be trying to make words and mimic speech and develop patterns and to talk or to crawl and to walk or to sit up or to, next level is engaging with others. So what should typical child play be looking like? So that is sort of the next thing, dialing back into the years and talking about it. That was our next kind of clue that something was amiss and something might have been off. We watched him play, but he would not engage with other kids. He would do this, what they call parallel play. So they play alongside a peer, but they do not engage with that peer. They could be sharing toys, but they're not going to usually, the person on the spectrum as a child is not going to integrate themselves into picking up the blocks and helping to make that tower with the other kid they're playing with, let's say.
Right.
They're just going to make their own, or they're going to take those blocks, or they're going to take that little toy car or what have you, and they're going to use it in atypical ways. So where it might come very naturally to the other kids they're playing with to zoom the car back and forth, to build the blocks into that tower, or so on. What they notice, children on the spectrum doing is they're taking those toys and using them in very, a divergent way, an atypical way, and using that toy for something altogether, different.
Right.
Yeah. So that can be a clue also.
So now, did you find with his sibling, because
he is a younger child, that's right.
Yeah,
so I had an older child. Yeah.
Did you notice that those kind of interactions with his brother, or was it when he was with kids that he wasn't familiar with?
Oh, yeah, good question. Tough question, Carrie. It was hard to notice for sure. Yeah. Matthew just kind of squeaked along. He would just do things at the threshold to make people think, oh, yeah, this looks okay. This looks all right. But sort of in our hearts and deep down, we were kind of questioning things. People just will say, well, you're just nervous. You're a nervous parent and you're transferring your nervousness onto your child. And if you would just relax,
right,
perhaps your child will know before you know that there's a diagnosis and that there's an actual clinical reason lurking behind there. This is maybe something you'll hear from a family member, from an observer.
Okay.
But back to your question, we were observing that in all kinds of situations where our son would play, not just with his brother, but once you get into, like, let's say, nursery school or those kind of things, or swimming lessons or play groups, or just what any regular busy toddler is up to.
Yeah.
It was starting to become apparent. Well, what's going on here? Or, he was very prone to taking risks that other children would not take. No child is willingly going to be so fearless that he would run right off the edge of the playground equipment and biff right into the sand.
Right.
Or bonk his head. And, these kind of things, where other children you're observing, hey, they are treading more gingerly here. They're being more cautious. They have more regard for personal safety. Sometimes the child on the spectrum does not exhibit that. And that kid is going to be maybe, and of course, there's always a risk involved. Is he going to run out into traffic because he doesn't understand? Right. So you, as the parent, sometimes in the ASD world, you have to be a hyper-vigilant parent.
Yeah.
And you're an exhausted parent, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So those were some of the early clues.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when would you say that you decided to, or how did the diagnosis come about?
Yes, great question. How did that all flow together? Right. So, as I say, we were just a busy, I'm just a busy mom, busy working mom. I was in the media. I am, getting up very early in the morning, getting to work at 4 a.m. so that I can be part of a, 6 a.m. broadcast of a news program, and then going home and mothering to these two boys, one of whom seems to need more mothering and lots more oversight and overseeing than the other one. So I think it was when my older went off to kindergarten. And lucky for us in Sherwood Park, we had a very, very good elementary school.
Right.
Once I got there, I started to have conversations with a friend of mine, her mom, who had been a longtime educator in Sherwood Park, and knew clinically a lot about what special needs students looked like and how they presented. Yeah. And so I would talk to my friend's mom, and she said, Andrea, if I were you, I would talk to so-and-so. And so down the hallway, she steered me to the head, the longtime head of the REACH program there, which is a special needs preschool program.
Okay.
It's morphed into something else, but early intervention is kind of the key there, with a multidiscipline team, so that small preschool kids before kindergarten can get into a school setting and start to see some of those clinicians in that kind of setting. So like a speech pathologist or physiotherapist, or these kind of occupational therapists and that kind of thing.
Right.
So she said, go and talk to that person. So that person steered me to someone else. And then, through that whole path, that sets you on that journey. Concurrently, at the same time, they said, you should maybe go and get him tested. And because autism is only a diagnosis through observation, and at that time was only done through the Glenrose, hospital,
right,
the rehab hospital, we, had to go through lots of hoops and steering and processes to try and get an inroad there to be able to get that appointment. And once you're there, a whole team does the observation for a full day.
Right. So it would now, just kind of backtracking a bit, Was he speaking? Was he
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
So that
So
kind of
like I say,
communication was good at that time.
yeah, great question for that too, Carrie. So yes, I should have maybe fleshed that out a little bit, but like I say, he just would always squeak through,
Right.
So he's just starting to talk, but it's late.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's talking, but he's using speech peculiarly, so there can be this thing. Like I say, I'm talking with educators now and people who know about special ed, and I would talk to them about, well, here's how his speech goes, and they said, oh, echolalia. And I said, well, what's echolalia? So they hear what you're saying and they just echo it and repeat it back. They're using language, and they're using speech, but not in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So again, he just wouldn't squeak by so that you could talk to him and kind of figure out what he was going to say. But he was always late for these milestones, I would say, but he could converse.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So then you fast forward again. You take them to the
Glenrose.
Yeah. Glenrose. And where were you at this point? Were you just searching for the relief in finding out what was going on, or were you still?
You hope against hope that there's not going to be something there. I suppose you don't want there to be a diagnosis, and
Mm-hmm.
You're hopeful that perhaps there is no special need here.
Mm-hmm.
But
where would you say you were kind of at that point mentally? Dealing with, like you said, you're tired, you're dealing with all these other things, and you're worrying about this possibility.
Yeah. Fairly concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, kind of hoping against hope. But by that point, once you go down that road, and by now he's probably about 3.5, I would say, and
okay.
A 3.5-year-old, and you can just tell that something is different here. Yeah. He's exhibiting these signs, and you start to do your own research, your own reading online. Mm-hmm. Online wasn't really that much of a thing back then.
Yes.
You'd be
I know, right?
just talking to other people. Yeah. You didn't just process from all these different sources.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit harder, to maybe have the world at your fingertips back then. But it just in the reading that you could do, and in networking, mm-hmm. and in talking with other people.
Right.
So that I would say it was a lot of apprehension.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say a low point, but definitely apprehensive is where I'd have been.
Right. Yeah. Most definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so you go into the Glenrose, and how was the assessment part of it for Matthew?
Yeah, that was, it's by then you're probably concluding that something's going to come out of this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like I say, it's an observation by a multidisciplinary team. So there's different professionals who are engaging with your child, and it's a full day. They're behind the glass, they're across the glass, they're doing, mm-hmm. there's all kinds of things. So, you're ready for it. And, I think we got the diagnosis that day before we left. And, okay. I think, I say,
I know it's hard to remember.
It starts to blur after a couple decades. My husband had some tears, I had some tears, and, but we said, we have to wipe that away, and we got to get going. Mm-hmm. You're on a new path. And you have to start to be your child's best advocate at that point.
Right. Yes. And that was something I wanted to ask you. I mean, we all know how important it is with anybody that you're taking care of, especially now with the mm-hmm. healthcare system mm-hmm. and all that. But to be your child's advocate, how important is that role in this
mm-hmm.
instance?
Well, like I say, you allow yourself that perhaps just that letdown. And, there's that great poem that was written out there about, I think it's from a woman's perspective. She thinks she's going on a flight to Paris, but she gets sidetracked and she ends up in Holland, mm-hmm. Never meant to be here, but she learns windmills and tulips can be beautiful. So you have to orient your thinking and start your mindset on a new path. And as I say, I always like to talk about the resiliency that you're going to need as the parent to a special needs individual who has an autism diagnosis. You are going to have to dig deep into your resilient pockets to draw out big heaps of it, because you're going to have to knock on a lot of doors. You're going to have to talk to a lot of people. You're going to have to keep pressing for answers. and for placement in programs or otherwise. There was, before the diagnosis portion, where I guess, was talking to our GP, or, the pediatrician for my son at the time. And I said, listen, we've got these concerns. What should we do? So, before all of that, we got a referral to a service, in Edmonton. And we're blessed with lots of great programs and lots of great resources. Unfortunately, I was just streamed into the wrong one. So, it took the shape of me taking Matthew to a resource center where we would meet, I don't know, I guess maybe weekly, with a psychologist who was to observe our playtime.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychologist, and this predated, this was quite early on, but where I still had an inkling, there's got to be something, that's underlying here.
Mm-hmm.
And, they said, well, yeah, Andrea, you should pick up on the cues from Matthew. Let him direct the play. Let him direct playtime and take your cues from him. And I'm thinking to myself, we have tantrums, we have fits, we have screaming like you've never seen. And I don't think it's because Matthew doesn't get to pick the thing we're playing, or the toy, or the activity, or the book, or what, it looks like. I don't think it's stemming from that. I think that's a bit simplistic. And at the end of the day what they told me was, he's a very spirited, willful, independent child, and that will serve him well later in life, was the conclusion. And so, another message that I like to give to people who suspect that something is off with their son or daughter is to say, listen to your gut. Just because you don't have the same kind of training, and just because you don't have the same kind of degree that some professional might hold, doesn't mean you're not an expert mm-hmm. on your kid. And like I say, if you surround yourself with enough small preschoolers, you probably know what it's supposed to be looking like.
Yes. Yeah.
So, just like I say to parents, don't just stop at, if I'd have stopped with, oh, he's an independent, spirited, willful child.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have gotten us, very many answers, and wouldn't have gotten us very far, and would not have served our son very well. So if you think as a parent that there is an underlying something, act on that and trust your gut and let that propel you forward.
Right.
And if you don't know who the right people are to have the conversations with, you just keep on talking to people until they can put you in touch with the right department, service, organization person.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, how was that for you as a parent, in like frustration? Because I think, you seem like a very strong person to me, mm-hmm. and whereas there might be a new mom coming up that mm-hmm. They're a little bit more leery to press that, and to have the confidence to say, no, look, this is how I feel. Like, know yourself, your body, your kids better than anybody else. So
yeah, totally. And you're right. That's just the kind of forceful personality that I probably come equipped with. So I was lucky. Yes, mm-hmm. I have a reporter background, and I was, always inquisitive and always pressing for truth, searching for answers, and seeking honesty. So you're right. It just came as second nature for me. Mm-hmm. But, advice to someone who maybe isn't equipped with that is, like I say, arm yourself with your research, read as much as you can, and now we're in a world that is much more interlinked and much more connected. You can make those connections quite readily and quite easily mm-hmm. to find parents who might be going through a similar, questioning process, right? So you can find them online, and you can dialogue with them, and you could have a discussion where, those kind of doors were not really available to me back, 20-ish years ago.
Yeah.
I had to rely on just networking, and face-to-face. Mm-hmm. So, for those people who feel like they can't, you absolutely can, you just, like I say, arm yourself, equip yourself, mm-hmm. Know your information, know your kid better than anyone else. And you have to be the door knocker and, the one that's doing the advocating. Mm-hmm. And it's, I think it's surprising. I think a lot of parents will surprise themselves with how much resiliency they're able to just pull from somewhere.
Right. And in that, I think too, when you start kind of advocating for them, for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because in my experience, the things that are blurry and unclear, that's where there's that trepidation, that bit of scariness, around things. And so to gain some knowledge and
like I say, it's important who you're surrounding yourself with.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, you just want to be, networking and surrounding yourself with whoever is going to give you just enough to fill up, that cup, right? And so that you have pockets that are overflowing with resiliency. So whether that is, your friend group, if you don't have a diagnosis for your child, that could look like, once you do have a diagnosis for your child, there are support groups. Of course, there are associations which, are dedicated to this disorder, autism spectrum disorder, but it applies for any parent whose child has a disability. Definitely you're going to be able to source out similar parents just by, some of the groups and organizations that you belong to. But it's very important for yourself to just surround yourself with those people who are going to make you feel good and propel you to keep going forward.
Right. And not staying isolated in your own world, right?
Yeah.
Without that support. Like, support is huge for your mental health.
Yes. Yeah.
In this, I think.
The support, for your mental health, whether that looks like needing to join one of those affiliated groups, with parents who find themselves in a similar boat, but it's amazing how organic it starts to become, that you will, my friend, she's a parent to a child with autism. You guys should get together. You guys should meet. So all of a sudden, those introductions, those links, those 6 degrees of separation start to shrink, and you will be surprised at all the people that you can find and come in contact with that are just great to network with, to know that you're not alone, and to just bounce these ideas off each other. How did you find it? What did you do? How did you do it? Where did you turn to? And so on and so forth.
Right. And I've heard that the community itself is very connected. It's very supportive.
Yeah. I think there's lots of opportunity for parents to equip each other with all of that empowerment and all of that knowledge and so on. Definitely. Yeah.
So I just wanted to touch on, oftentimes ASD is considered an invisible disability.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yes.
And how it...
Right. Because autism spectrum disorder affects the brain and what is being processed in the brain, autism most often doesn't come with any outward or physical signs that there is some kind of impairment or disability going on. That's not to say in all cases, but most often there is something that is not easily apparent. So when we think about sometimes people who are visually impaired, they might have a cane, you see them reading with their hand in Braille, and you can probably make that leap fairly accurately that they are visually impaired or that there's blindness involved. And not so for someone with autism, because it's a cognitive impairment. The IQ can be usually impacted by the disorder. And so outwardly, people with autism look pretty typical, but it's in the behavior piece where we see that there is a disorder or a disability there. So it can be referred to as just not evident or invisible. And so just to take you through, some pieces from my background that maybe some other parents out there can relate to, quite often, because the person with autism has a sensory processing disorder, which means they're not processing all the input that they're getting from lights and from sounds and other people the same. So this poses great agitation to them, and they can become flustered, and it can lead to a meltdown where, they just need to let off steam. Or they sometimes might have tics or other physical things that are going on that, go hand in hand, which, all of a sudden, blammo, and there's an eruption. And that can make for a lot of judging, I'm sure.
Right. And we were talking kind of a little bit about it earlier, and like I was a hairdresser for years, and I had a few clients that had autism spectrum, and it was something that, they made a lot of noise,
Right.
terrified. I always felt so bad that I was seemingly causing them pain.
Right.
But you see sometimes the looks and like, well, why are they crying so much, and why are they? How did you deal with that? The challenge of that?
It was pretty hard, Carrie. Like, I have to say, looking back on it, it's tough probably for any parent. My child is melting down, and you get those looks like, can't you control your child? Why is your child screaming? Why is your child throwing himself on the floor? Why is your child hitting your other child? There was all of that going on to manage with Matthew, especially when he was small. Once he got language, some of that turmoil for him managed to go down. So it did ebb off a little bit. Once he could express himself with what he wanted or needed, it made it a little bit easier to manage. But,
definitely,
the child still melted down quite a bit. And that's just how his autism presents. And so, yes, not only, you have to be prepared to have a thick skin, you just are going to have to, again, rely on that resiliency somehow. But you just have to do it with, what's best for your child in mind, and let that propel you forward. But you have to be ready for those stares from other onlookers. We caused lots of ruckuses everywhere we went, and probably much to the chagrin of my older son, who I'm sure was, wishing that it wasn't happening and it wasn't going on. I can tell you, I packed, Matthew up out of places and took him home more times than I care to admit to. But like I was saying, it's embarrassing for any parent who's going through that to have, to feel like they are suffering in silence because of onlookers' judgments. But imagine I was doubly visible because I had a high-profile news job. So I was a TV anchor. So most people knew that it was Andrea Engel's kid who's melting down, and is she just a poor parent? So I learned, what Matthew has taught me, I guess, is definitely to not judge a book by its cover, and to not leap to those conclusions. When I was parenting him as a small child, I remember being at our local mall and coming across a family, a woman pushing a child in a stroller who was much too old to be in a stroller, didn't seem to be, presenting any signs of a disability per se, and sucking on a soother. And, the old Andrea would have said, rip that soother out of that kid's mouth and get them out of the stroller and walking on their own 2 feet. But you know what? You haven't walked a mile in their shoes. So it's taught me to just dial down the judging. You don't know what other people are going through. And I always remember, like, one of those fridge magnets, be kinder to people than you have to be, in a day. Be kinder than you think is necessary, because you never know what another person is going through. So I kind of try to live by that motto. Because I have been on the receiving end of that so much with Matthew's tantrums and his outbursts and his meltdowns, because unfortunately he presents a lot of volatility from his disorder. And
how did that affect? You brought up his sibling, his brother. How was that for him then growing up?
I don't know. We're just really fortunate that we came out of that with an older son who is certainly an old soul. And I guess he just came to us like that. And we're so very fortunate, and we're so very lucky to have that. He just, he's always just been overly empathetic, probably, where individuals are concerned. And just from a very young age. And we were just lucky for that. I remember when my older son was, I think, about in kindergarten, and I, again, took him to the mall. I went to the mall a lot, so it was a way to get out of the house.
Right?
It was something to do. But load these kids into a shopping cart and push them around. But, like, they have those little coin op things, ride the pony or Bob the Builder toy, those mechanized cart things, whatever. So, no, I remember having our older son, and someone was in a wheelchair at the mall, and he said, Mommy, why is that person, what's going, like he didn't know. So maybe he was about kindergarten aged, and Matthew would have been about 3 years old. And I explained to our older son, well, he doesn't have the use of his legs. And he started crying in the mall for the gentleman who was in a wheelchair and couldn't use his legs. So we've just been so super fortunate, and definitely incorporated a lot of books into the house. From a person's perspective, there's lots of kids' storybooks all about my brother, and it's about having a brother with autism. So just sourcing out, some of those, library materials or purchasing books, whatever it needs to look like. There's videos, there's DVDs, all kinds of things that are geared towards having a sibling who is different. Right. So we were always really, cognizant of that. But we also, as a family, early on decided, autism is not going to define us and it's not going to limit us. And we have pushed Matthew at every opportunity, so we're a family that likes to travel. We like to go on adventures, and we just put a little backpack on him and pushed him forward at the airport, and had to manage his, obsessions. And he happened to be obsessed with elevators, escalators, and he was a flight risk. He'd run away, we'd lose him, and where did he go? Oh, he's on the elevator, he's on the escalator, he's pursuing those. We had to have a very watchful eye on him. But like I say, we did not let it define us. We did not let it define our family, and certainly don't let it define your child. Your child is living with that as a permanent and lifelong disorder, but it doesn't need to be the only thing about your child. So you have to be finding what your child is good at, finding what interests your child, finding what your person gravitates to, and pushing forward with that. And, if that looked like, I was the oldest parent at the swimming pool with their kid in the splash program because we had to take it for the 20th time to get him comfortable in the water. Well, that's what you have to do. So yeah, growing a thicker skin, and, you have to be ready to shake off that judgment. How do you do it? Whatever it needs to be. If you need to get therapy yourself, if you need to get counseling yourself, if you need to get counseling collectively as a family, maybe you need that. Lucky for myself, I've always just had a very strong core of individuals around me, and good family, and good peer support networks with friends and all of that. So I've been able to manage it that way. But that's not to say that, you should hesitate if you feel like you need some extra help, intervention in how to manage your stress and how to cope, because it does get hard. It absolutely gets hard right from the diagnosis. And then, as your child ages and shifts, and if you think, adolescence is hard for the average kid, the neurotypical teenager that you have, it's doubly difficult for somebody, who has these hormones going on, who also is just trying to navigate the world, and they don't really understand how to process what's going around them.
Yeah. And that's what it actually brings me to a question. I know it can affect their mental health as well. And oftentimes they know that they are aware that there's a bit of a difference.
Yes, they could be aware. Yep.
And did you ever come across that, or have you seen any of that?
Yeah. With some people who aren't as impacted by their autism, I think that they are more prone to knowing that there might be a difference to themselves versus how the rest of their peers are processing things and whatnot. I guess it's just to what level they feel that disconnect. Luckily, with Matthew, he doesn't, we've had to sort of drill it into him that this is a disorder which he possesses. He doesn't really know that he's different.
Okay.
And whether that's good or bad or otherwise. But yeah, we've certainly had him overseen with, whether it's a psychologist or a psychiatrist through the years, just to have, regular, oversight and managing of that. And if it needs to look like some medication, you have to be open to that advice that your practitioner is giving you also, because maybe there is some, supplement, perhaps, pharmaceutical that, some intervention there could take the edge off for your child.
Right.
So you have to be ready for that. And as a parent, you if you need something like that as well, yeah, you have to be embracing of that if that's going to help with your, mental stability and your mental health to help you to soldier on. You can't be having, anything attached to that.
That's right.
Adversely.
Yeah. And because everybody's affected differently.
That's right.
By different situations.
Yes.
And again, depending on the severity and, family support and all that stuff. So would you say there's specifically anywhere you can go to find those resources? Like you said, the advocacy from before.
Well, I think that, whoever is sort of managing your case, and I guess your pediatrician, they're all going to be a good resource. There's many, many tools you'll need to put in your toolbox as the parent of someone with ASD. So I can't say that there's one, one place that's, the data bank that's holding it all. But there's going to be a few places that you'll know to be able to steer to that are going to put you in the right, if your child is receiving specialized services, they're great with telling you, and there's this also that you could get, this outreach or this intervention, or, there's a speaker coming and this would be really great if you listen to that doctor or this so there's lots in the whole lineup.
Lots
there
available.
Oh yeah, there's tons. And back to the caring for yourself, and just managing your own mental health as you parent someone on the spectrum. It might seem overwhelming and you just can't let your mind go to, well, what's my child's future going to be? None of us know that about even our about our typical children, I should say. We don't know what our neurotypical kids are going to be when they grow up, and we don't know that for for these kids who are on the spectrum either. You just have to break it off into manageable chunks, I like to say, and one chunk at a time, and go from there, and look after yourself and be kind to yourself.
Give yourself grace. I always say that.
You're going to have doubts and you're going to have stress and you're going to have worry and anxiety. There's going to be those dark days, but there's also going to be those really joyous occasions as well. And that's going to be, it's those small victories where, those small celebrations that mean so much in the life of someone with, with a cognitive disorder like that. It's just different celebrations. It's back to the person who got off the plane and they found themselves in Holland with the tulips,
Yes, exactly.
So, but just to be kind for yourself, and you have to find out what's going to get you through it. And if that's lots of bubble baths, or if that's taking up jogging, or if that's joining a help group or a book club, or you're going to read more, or you're going to exercise more, whatever it is.
Right. And finding a lifestyle that fits it too.
Yeah.
And that it's okay to shift, like you had made the shift yourself.
Yeah. You might find that, that your life needs a shakeup, and the way you thought it was going to go, you're going to have to stream a different way. So just to, have this really open mindset and build in that flexibility for yourself, because you may need to pivot a bunch more times than you ever thought you were going to need to.
Right. And yes, as you said,
to be persistent, knocking on those doors. If you think that your child would benefit from a certain therapy group, whatever it is,
and it stays with that trust your gut.
Yeah. Trust your gut. Yeah. If you think that, enrolling into yoga for the 4th time with your child, this might bring them some zen,
does he like yoga
group. No,
he doesn't like it. Okay.
I just thought, to keep on with it. But it managed my stress. So that was a good thing, doing the mother and son yoga for a time there. It helped me. Yeah.
So is there something right now that he really loves, like that his hobbies or his huge interests for him?
He does love swimming to a large degree. So back to the pool with me, and doing the, preschool paddlers time and time again. I like to say it paid off. He really does love that. And he, like many people with autism, he has a very narrow set of interests.
Okay.
So, it's preferred places to travel, and it's preferred movies like Disney Pixar holds
Okay.
a strange magnetic pull for him. And so, yeah,
Right.
it's just, collecting some of the, character collectibles and that sort of thing, and watching all the movies, knowing all the dialogue and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Now, has there ever been any situations where and you don't have to answer this, I'm just curious, that you didn't feel comfortable with him in, that you did have to make a huge pivot?
Yeah. That's a hard one to answer.
Is
Gosh.
it? Yeah.
And nothing that really shines or stands out, Carrie, I would say, just,
there hasn't been any really huge bad experiences, and that's wonderful.
And that's good. Yeah. But I'm sure there were little things along the way where it just wasn't the right fit for a play date or something, let's say. And you can see that it's just going poorly or off the rails, and this is just not going to produce a good result. Like I say, you just have to carry that open mind and to say, oh, well, this is not the right person for him to try and strike up a friendship with, or what have you. So
which, as a parent, we know can happen at any point with any child.
Anytime.
It's like, are they welcome back? I don't know. So I ask all of my guests this. Can you tell us one of the last best things you do every night before you go to bed?
Oh, I play a terrible little video game on my phone. I can't even.
Oh, nice.
I can't even share it. No, it's terrible. It's addictive. It's terrible. But it's very. It brings order and zen, because it's a connect the dot kind of game.
Okay. See, there you go. And that's, I know I've felt guilty because I watch a particular sitcom every night before bed. But it makes me laugh, right? So it's just different for everybody, and I love that.
Yeah. No, I do. It's called 2 dots.
2 dots.
2 dots.
I might have to look that up now.
Oh, it's just patterns, and it's but it probably delivers some of the order and stability that I'm craving, probably in a crazy day. Yeah.
And is this, if it's
2 dots?
Yeah.
I can't believe it's like my guilty pleasure. I had to share it.
I love it.
So the creators of the game can thank me, because I'll steer people their way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So this has been wonderful, and again, I am just so thankful that you took the time to.
My pleasure.
To share. And
I hope it was, an enlightening message for people. And my only hope is, somebody can take something away from it.
Absolutely.
From sharing.
Yeah, for sure. So on that note, is there one piece of advice that stood out for you when you were going through everything that really kind of carried you through? Yeah,
for sure. There was, as I say, one of my best friends, it was her mom, who was a retired educator. And I can still remember her telling me this, and I can still remember the hallway at the elementary school. I still remember where I was when she said it. And it stuck with me, and it became like a personal mantra, and it sort of guided me. And when I had times where I was unsure or struggling or faltering, and I just plucked up this sentence that she had spoken. And, this was probably, 18 years ago she said it or something, so I'm maybe phrasing it differently. But what she said to me that day was, Andrea, you have to remember, Matthew is more similar to other children than he is different. And I went, wow, oh, profound. I hadn't thought of it that way. I was only living with and focusing on the differences and the things that set him apart, or, were different. And then that just, made my mindset, just shift a different way, and to focus on different things, the similar things, the things that were alike, and the things that I could build on with him, and, to shape his journey from there. So I loved that when she said he's more similar than he is different.
Right.
And that was just, at the end of the day, that's for all human beings, and for all of us on the earth together. That's the underpinning of it all.
It is.
Everybody is more similar to each other than we are dissimilar.
Yes.
So I loved that piece of advice.
I love that too.
Still remember it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's perfect. It's a perfect way to end a great night
conversation. Thank you.
Great conversation.
It was a great conversation, Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning into tonight's podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to Andrea tonight, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have. You can give me a follow as usual on Instagram at carryonwithcarrie_podcast and on Facebook at Carry On With Carrie Podcast. I am now, exciting news, available on Amazon Music and on Spotify. So if you feel like you're compelled to follow and share, I would sure love your support, with the hopes of reaching just one more person at a time.